then it becomes a personal choice of, are you willing to sacrifice a bit of a chance of success or a large amount chance of success because it's interesting to you and because you want it to exist in the world? That becomes the calculus. You're listening to another episode of Startups for the Rest of Us. I'm your host, Rob Walling. And in this episode, I fly solo and I answer listener questions on topics ranging from choosing between two side projects in the AI space, whether early niche marketing pigeonholes you for later, bundling features versus splitting into multiple apps, and more. There's some great listener questions in the hopper. And of course, audio and video questions go to the top of the stack. If you have a question for this show that you'd like to hear me or me and a guest answer, head to startupsfortherestofus.com, click Ask a Question in the top nav. And even if you're on a mobile device, you can record a quick video, quick audio question. Of course, those go to the top of the stack, or you can send in a text question, and those do get answered eventually. In addition, I also prioritize medium to later stage questions. The beginner questions get answered ultimately. You'll see that I mingled one or two into this episode. But in general, I like to answer more advanced questions because otherwise every question's about how to validate, how to find ideas, how to, do the things that kind of gets tiring talking about over and over the course of 15 years. And so if you have those types of questions, you can go back and listen to the last 784 episodes and you can perhaps get some advice on that. And of course, you can still send in early stage questions. As I said, I will answer them eventually. Before I dive in to these questions, I want to invite you to MicroConf Europe. This year, we're heading further east than ever before. We're going to Istanbul, Turkey, from September 28th through the 30th of 2025. It's the closest we've ever been to Asia, right at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, making it easier than ever for founders from around the world to connect. I've never been to Istanbul. I'm super stoked to go. We'll have incredible speakers, our world-class hallway track, and some fun excursions to help you connect with other founders in a deeper way than just sitting in a stuffy conference room. Istanbul's massive international airport offers direct flights from over 300 destinations in more than 120 countries, making it easier than ever to attend, whether you're coming from Barcelona, Berlin, Bangalore, or Boston. If you're ready to join us, you can get all the details and grab your ticket before they sell out at microconf.com/Europe. This event will sell out. We've been selling our events out for the past few years, and this will be no exception. So I hope to see you there. And with that, let's dive into our first listener question from Pablo.
Hello, Rob. I'm Pablo from Spain. I have a full-time consulting job that I love, but also an entrepreneurial itch that I need to scratch. I'm developing two side projects on nights and weekends. The first one is an AI seizure detection app. The second one is an AI tool for automating market research reports. The seizure detection app faces a lot of regulatory hurdles and has limited revenue prospects, to be honest. But it's a passion project inspired by my daughter who has Dravet syndrome and suffers from seizures at night. The second one has more revenue potential, but it faces some strong, well-funded incumbents. So doing both is a lot. I don't really have the time. So I want to pick a path. Shall I focus on the healthcare app, potentially pivoting to a B2B model? Or shall I fight the well-funded incumbents in the market research space? Or maybe I should just start over and get a better idea? Thank you so much for everything you do.
It's an interesting question here. And one thing that I never do is tell founders to pursue an idea or not pursue it, or if they're picking between two or three. My honest answer is I don't know. People have built ideas that I thought would never succeed. We, in fact, get tiny seed applicants that are growing super fast and are doing 10, 15, 20,000 MRR. And I will tell them in the interview, if you had pitched me this idea, I would have said this will never work. And yet here you are. Like, it's really hard to know from the start what's going to work. And so I try very hard not to give advice and feedback on ideas unless I'm the target customer, in which case I can say, I would use that. That's super interesting. I would pay a little bit, a medium bit, a lot bit of money for that. Or I will say, I would not use that. I'm able to weigh in as a customer, but to act like just because I've started my own companies and I know a lot about SaaS and I've done a bunch of investments, to act like I know what's going to work and what's not is a lot of hubris, especially in a space that I don't know really well. So there are some spaces that we invest in through Tiny Seed where we have a lot of companies operating in that space. And sometimes I can weigh in like, ooh, that's a very tough space. It's very seasonal. It's very price sensitive. I wouldn't do that. And if you came to me and said, hey, I have a B2C app, obviously two-sided marketplace that takes a percentage of GMV, what are my other don'ts? Obviously, I can tell you things that I wouldn't do, or I can tell you about a space that I have knowledge in. But these, I don't know. Honestly, I have a gut feel that I can lend you. And take my opinion with as much of a grain of salt as you would take anyone else on the internet. Except maybe on the internet, someone's being an asshole and trying to troll you. And I'm not doing that. I can give you my honest feedback. But I really would prefer as an entrepreneur that you go with your gut and that you weigh the factors. You go to the 5 p.m. framework, which is 100, 200 episodes ago. And you kind of go down that list and you think to yourself, which of these do I think will work? And then maybe ask yourself, if I think the seizure detection app has a higher chance of failure, lower chance of success, then it becomes a personal choice of, are you willing to sacrifice a bit of a chance of success or a large amount chance of success because it's interesting to you and because you want it to exist in the world? That becomes the calculus. With all that said, if I were to weigh in on this, I think that regulatory hurdles as a single bootstrap founder doing stuff on the side, probably not something I would personally want to attack. And so what I might do is do the second idea, build that out, try to market it. And when I get tired, when I need a break, if I kind of want to keep hacking on something, but I'm tired of what I'm doing, I might hack on the seizure app a bit, or just mothball it, put it on the side, hope someone else builds it if it's something that you really want to see in the world. I'm not scared of a space with a lot of competition, especially if you can find those competitors' Achilles heels. What are their weaknesses? Are they overpriced? Do they have a crappy sales model? Are they not building features that customers are requesting? You go to Capterra and G2 and any place else that they're rated, and you look at the 1-star reviews and you think to yourself, oh, they're not building this feature. This is the feature that I can build to potentially compete with them. I'm not scared by a competitive space. So if you're giving me the either or, I would pick the second one based on that logic. I'm not saying it's the right answer. I'm saying it's the answer that I would personally go forward with based on 70 seconds of information that you gave me about it. And that's the other thing to keep in mind is I'm operating with very limited information as I give you this advice because I don't really know these spaces. I know the latter one a bit more, right? The kind of marketing analytics space. But I'm operating, with a full 3 minutes of thought given to this. So it really is a gut reaction, a blink reaction based on patterns that I've seen. Your last question was kind of like, should I do one of these or just pick a third? And that's impossible for me to answer. I don't know. It depends on if you can come up with a better idea than either of these first two. And this is just always that time that no one can prescribe, right? So in the SaaS playbook, I can tell you, hey, if you have, early weak product market fit, I can kind of tell you the steps that if you implement them and do them well, and you put in the hard work, you build the skill, and you have a little bit of luck, you'll get to 7, maybe even 8 figures in revenue. Like it is repeatable. I can be pretty prescriptive about which marketing approaches and how to test them and this and that. But in this early stage, you're at more of the SaaS Launchpad stage, right? I have this course, saaslaunchpad.co, and it talks about idea generation, idea validation, idea evaluation. Walks through, I think when I have 26 videos, it's almost 10 hours of video content. It really focuses on this stage. And that's maybe something you want to, consider getting that course. But if not, you've heard me talk about 5 p.m. framework and 2200 validation on this show. And that's the kind of criteria that I would be thinking about as I looked at ideas. So thanks for that question, Pablo. Hope it was helpful. My next question is about early stage niche marketing and does it pigeonhole you for later? From Sean Matthews, who has asked several questions on the show in the past.
Hey, Rob, Sean Matthews from Left Hook here. We are currently a services agency that builds integrations for B2B software companies. And we've taken that expertise that we've gained over the past number of years and built an open source framework that helps deliver those integrations. As we built the framework out, we wanted to make it super extensible and basically very flexible to cover all sorts of integration types. But as we focus our marketing and as we think about our target market and our product that we're trying to build on top of or in the ecosystem, we are entirely focused on B2B software and not on any of the other integration use cases. So that would be people that are trying to automate their own back office systems, people that are trying to automate the automation layer for your product. So integrating Twilio and SendGrid and Google Maps and whatever else. The framework could be used to go do those integrations. And there's no reason that, documentation couldn't state it. So the question is, as we think about our go-to-market, do we accidentally pigeonhole ourselves into this, hey, that framework and left hook are only useful for B2B software. And therefore, when the time comes for expansion or, someone wants to use the framework for those other use cases, they just think not built for me. How do we avoid that? Is that a problem? And is that something that you can get over later on with a different, unique marketing push? Basically, I'm just worried about our brand getting pigeonholed in our brand and our framework getting pigeonholed into only does B2B software integration, as opposed to the much broader expansion market that we could get into, that the technology is just no reason it couldn't be used for it. So it's really just a marketing push in the beginning. Do we pigeonhole ourselves in, and how do we avoid that for potential future expansion? Thanks.
I like this question. I think it's a good one. I would not at all be concerned about niching in to B2B with the thought that if things go well and we get traction, that next year or 2-3 years from now, that we expand the use cases. Do I think you can get pigeonholed? Not really. I mean, I think especially if you come out with this whole, hey, we're a 2.0 now, you do a big promotion around we've now expanded. You let all the customers know, you bang all the social media drums. However you can reach people, you re-architect the marketing site to where it really calls out, we are now this plus that. We're not just B2B anymore. Now I take it it's not B2C, but it's more, you were saying like back office and line of business. I don't understand quite how that's not B2B, but whatever. I mean, the specifics of it don't matter. I would not be scared at all to start with a niche as large as B2B. And that is, in fact, I love that idea. I mean, I would start with that positioning because I like the space people are willing to pay for all the reasons you hear on the show. I would start with B2B, and then at a later time, you just have to bang the drum. You've watched this with ConvertKit, which is now Kit, and they started as landing page and like basic email newsletter for authors, and then it was for bloggers, and then it was for makers/creators. And I don't know what their homepage says now, but they just kept getting broad as more people started using them. We've seen this with BidSketch, which was originally proposal software for designers, and then it just became proposal software for anybody who needs to create a proposal on the internet. And there are other examples too, maybe not of niching down. Well, there's a ton of other niche down examples that just expanded over time, land and expand. You either add niches one at a time or you just go really broad and kind of go horizontal at a certain point. But there are other use cases of this. Think about Intercom, and when they first started, all they were, my memory at least, was that chat widget. That was it. And it was an in-app chat widget. And I'm trying to even think, I don't think they handled email at the time. They were just a very limited functionality because that's what you can do well in the early days. And now the offerings are extensive and they just keep adding stuff and adding stuff. HubSpot's another one, right? Originally, it was just inbound marketing. So it was kind of like Google Analytics plus landing pages, or maybe even a website builder like Squarespace. I think the early one was just some kind of marketing landing pages plus Google Analytics plus some email or something. And that just got bigger and bigger. And then they got into CRM, and then they got into whatever else HubSpot is these days. They just kept expanding. Now, again, those are not niche land and expand where you're adding verticals or going horizontal, but you get the idea. HubSpot's not pigeonholed. They probably were for a while of, aren't they the inbound marketing people? But you don't think that these days. Now you think the CRM, because their CRM is so damn big. And you can do this too. So I would not at all be concerned about niching down, especially if that's what's going to get you traction and that's what's going to get you attention in the early days. So thanks for that question, Sean. Hope it was helpful. My next question is from Dylan about when it's warranted to lower prices.
Hey there, Rob. This is Dylan Pierce from Cleveland, Ohio. Thanks for taking the time to answer my last question. It's been a few months and your answer was really helpful. So my new question for you is, have you ever had a scenario where you realized that you had to lower your pricing? I know the mantra is to always find ways to increase your price, and that makes sense. Differentiation, you're bootstrapped, you can't necessarily compete in the race to the bottom. But what are some signals where you found that your market, you just absolutely need to lower prices to be competitive? So some background for me, I've built a product that integrates with e-commerce platforms, and this product uses computer vision, and it's typically reserved for banks and fintech or startups that have a developer team that they can integrate over APIs and have that complexity to onboard. Whereas my solution is a simple plug-and-play app, and it adds this functionality with the e-commerce use case in mind. I've been noticing recently that there's been churn due to competitors that have much lower pricing, but take a different approach than I do, less quality. But at the same time, I also rank number one for the key terms I care about. So I am considering lowering pricing just because of the pushback I'm getting from new leads, as well as retaining existing customers due to a lower priced, in my opinion, lower quality approach. But in the end, it seems like the sensitivity to quality isn't so high. So at what point would you consider lowering prices? What are your thoughts on that? Thanks.
There are absolutely times when it is warranted to lower prices. Absolutely. So let's say, for example, I know you're not asking this. Let's say, for example, you raised $10 or $20 million and you wanted to just grab a huge chunk of the market really fast. I would 100% drop my prices and I would undercut all my competitors in a land grab type of situation. And you see this with big venture funded companies. And as long as they can stay ahead of the burn and stay alive, it's a very interesting strategy. Now, you didn't talk about doing that. That's a very calculated way of doing it with a bunch of money in the bank. You're saying, I'm losing deals. Customers don't care about the quality of the results like I do, and like I thought they would. And sometimes you build a feature, because quality is just a feature, right? Quality of the results. Sometimes you build a feature and no one else cares. And we did that plenty at Drip. I've done that plenty with every app that I've had. And sometimes that happens. And so if you're having trouble convincing people, no, ours is twice as good, 3 times as good, and no one cares, and they're undercutting you, I would 100% consider lowering prices. There are times when product market fit drifts. There are times when new competitors come into a space, or competitors that are existing, they raise the money and drop the prices. There are times when your entire customer base, maybe there is massive layoffs in that sector. If you're serving, say, government offices, and suddenly there's a freeze on government spending where, it's really hard to get contracts renewed and you consider lowering prices. Yes, there are external factors where I would consider lowering them. And obviously, there's a difference between lowering and raising prices and actually charging for the value that people are receiving. So a big mistake I see people make is, all right, here's my SaaS pricing and it's like $20 a month. Well, what's that for? Well, it's kind of for the whole app. Well, for how many users? Just unlimited. And for how many emails per month, or whatever the value metric is? Just unlimited. It's like, okay, that's a problem. You probably need 3 pricing tiers. That's a whole other conversation about how to structure those, but people leave money on the table there. Another way they leave money on the table is they say, all right, so now I have my $25, my $50, and my $100 a month plans. It's like, okay, well, what if like Target or Best Buy or Apple Computer or some massive Fortune 500 company came and they need to use your software like across their whole huge department or their entire, employee base. How much would they pay you? Well, I guess they'd pay us $100 a month. And it's like, okay, so that's where you leave them at. Like, that's messed up. Your pricing's you need an enterprise plan. You need to charge them $100,000 a year, whatever. You've heard me talk about this. In addition, most makers, most developers, and most early stage founders undercharge for their product. And so that's kind of the rule of thumb that we see, coming into Tiny Seed, for example, which is something that I've tracked pretty closely. It's like 75, 80% of folks have either the pricing's too low or the value metrics off or just something else is messed up. It's just, they know it's off. And so a ton of the early strategy and advising calls that I do with founders are around pricing. And I kind of generally feel like it's like that across the Startups for the Rest of Us, MicroConf, Tiny Seed ecosystem. Whether it's 75, 80%, 55, 60%, it doesn't matter. It's a lot. It is the majority, I have no doubt. And so that is why that advice comes out, because most of the time your price too low or your value metrics messed up or your pricing isn't ideal. But with that said, there are 100% times when you should lower them. And I think I gave examples of when that is earlier. I won't rehash those. In all of the times that I've seen tiny seed companies raise their pricing, because we do encourage them to, and not just blindly, but it's kind of obvious, you kind of get a feel for what something maybe should be charged, or at least the range. And a lot of folks are undercharging when they start with Tiny Seed. And of all the times that Tiny Seed companies have decided to raise their pricing, I believe I've only seen one, maybe two times where that was a mistake, where they went not even up market, but they just raised their pricing 20, 30, 40%. And it was a mistake. And it kind of wrecked their funnel. And they realized, we outpaced the market. And our customer base or our competitors or whatever, whatever the pricing is in this space doesn't support that. And they backed off. And I can think of one off the top of my head that I remember the company name. And I'm just going to I'm going to wiggle and say, there's probably at least another that I've forgotten. There's probably 2 or 3. But I mean, we have had certainly more than 100 companies, and maybe it's approaching 150, of the 224 investments I've made. It's probably in that range that have raised pricing multiple times. And so usually that's the way to go. But as you said, Dylan, if you're losing deals consistently and price is a big deal, then it's either, I either need to provide more value or I might need to consider lowering my prices. So I really do appreciate this kind of question, because it calls into question blanket advice, right? And blanket advice and rule of thumb advice is good to a point, and it's good for folks to hear, but there are typically some exceptions somewhere. Now, there's not as many exceptions as a lot of everybody wants to be a snowflake, but I'm different. And I always hear, you give this advice all the time, don't do B2C, two-sided marketplace, takes percentage of GMV, but I'm different. And my business is different, where I shouldn't raise prices because my customers won't pay it. And it's like, usually that's not the case. You're not as unique of a snowflake as you think you are, but there are, I'll say always, or in almost all cases, some type of exceptions of when that blanket advice just isn't the right advice for you. So thanks for that question, Dylan. Hope it was helpful. My next question is about one ICP versus many.
Hi, Rob. It's Joe here from Australia. I've got 2 questions today, if you can fit them in. Question 1 is around how to narrow down a focus on one product versus another. I think I've got 2 options as I see it. Option 1 would be to pursue a SaaS for a specific ICP and then go deep on the features that relate to that ICP. So it'll be a bit more of a vertical style approach. Or option 2 would be to still go after a few ICPs, 2 or 3 ICPs that would most benefit from the product, and then be a little bit more generic in the features and brand positioning. And why I feel it's an important question is really how I brand it and how I market it. So that's got me procrastinating a little bit. If you can help me figure things out a bit and give me a sense for how you'd approach it, that may help.
I want to answer Joe's first question before we hear the second. This one is tough for me to answer without more context. It feels to me like it does depend in a way that if you're going to go after, say, professional services like lawyers and accountants and, insert a third ICP that's similar to those two, maybe like bankers, mortgage brokers, there's something akin to that. You get the idea. If they're all pretty similar and they need to be a little more, the features need to be a little more generic to serve those 3 markets, I don't know that that's the end of the world. The thing I think that I disagree with you on is you say this will affect how I brand it and how I market it. Now, it will affect how you market it because you need to get the right people to the app. And if you have 3 ICPs, then you can market it to all 3 of those ICPs or to those verticals. And ICPs, for those that don't know, are your ideal customer profile. So if you are proposal software made for designers, to call back to my earlier example, designers are your ICP. And even more than that, maybe it's like one person freelance design micro agencies, or maybe it's 5 to 10 person design firms. That's kind of gets more, and it's the manager or the owner or the CEO or the founder, or there's some role often at a particular company that can be your ICP. And this is where it comes back to, I have this phrase called orthogonal SaaS, right? There's vertical SaaS, which serves a specific niche, usually an industry, can be other things. And then there's horizontal that can be used by any company type, not just in a specific niche. And then orthogonal is where you target a particular role at any type of company. So it's a combination of the two. It's more a horizontal app that can be used anywhere, but you do target that particular job title, like the head of HR or the VP of engineering. So for me, the branding, unless you're going to pick your name, it's going to be like legal blah versus professional services blah. That's kind of your branding. I wouldn't do that, because if you want to expand later, you don't want legal in the name and the design and the colors and all the other stuff. I don't think your branding changes, but it depends on the specifics. I think this is a tough one for me to answer. I would tend to think about how many resources do I have in terms of time and money. Having one ICP makes things simpler, but you're making a bigger bet. How certain are you that ICP is correct? You can hedge your bet, and hedging your bet is an expression that can be positive or negative, right? Oftentimes we use it as negative, like don't hedge your bet. But sometimes you do want to hedge your bet, and you do want to have 2 or 3 ICPs to learn more. If you roll it out with 3 and one of them takes off, then you go with that one and you kill the other ones for now. The problem with that is it spreads you a little thin, right? If you truly are trying to do these 3 parallel or adjacent niches, are you doing cold outreach campaigns to all 3 of them? And if you are not specifically, your H1 doesn't specifically say, we are software for lawyers, but it says we are software for these 3 ICPs, or you try to just say professional services. I don't know, is that a little weaker? Yeah, probably. So there are trade-offs here. I think the big question I'd be asking myself is, how confident am I that this single ICP that I'm thinking of is going to work? And can I gather more data to confirm or deny that assumption before I go all in on any of this, before I make this decision? I don't think it's the end of the world to have 2 or 3 ICPs. It does make it harder. And so you really are going to want to have the time and energy and attention to be able to focus on all 3, or not focus, but to be able to handle all 3. As I said, it's easier to have one ICP. And generally, if I'm just starting out, I probably want to try to pick one, but you don't just want to pick one at random. That's the problem, is like, do you have data? I think it comes back to be my big thought. Again, branding, I would try to make the branding work whether I had 1 or 3. Because if I want to pivot from 1, not even pivot, right, but expand from 1 to 3 next month, or I want to go from the 3 I have down to 1 that works, I don't want to have to with my branding. I can change an H1, but I don't want to change my domain name or my design or my colors or you just don't want it to be there. So I would make it flexible enough that it could support either case. And now let's hear Joe's second question.
The second question is just around how to spec things properly with an agency. What have you typically used in the past, and how deep would you invest in that? For example, would you get a bootstrap SaaS toolkit for them? Would you develop Figma boards for them and Jira stories and requirements boards? If you could give me a sense for how you'd approach that, that'd be amazing. Thanks, Rob.
I think it depends on the agency. And I would probably ask them how they typically work with clients. And I would be kind of opinionated about it. I think Jira stories, like you said, I think Figma. These days, would I use AI to help generate however I think? Like if I think in wireframes, I would probably build wireframes, or I would have AI do it, or I would do it in Balsamiq or in Figma. If I think more of like full-blown screens, maybe I do that. If it's just stories and I want to list out I kind of think of what is easiest for me and present that to the agency of like, can you work with this? Like create a sample flow, or a sample page, or you get the idea. Create a couple samples and have them look at it. Conversely, you ask them, hey, what are the top 3 ways you typically work with clients? Because if they've already worked with clients using specific tools, if you have overlap there, that's probably the best way to go. So that answer also is, it kind of depends, but I would want to get more information on that agency, and I would definitely want a recommendation on an agency. I wouldn't just go to the internet or be doing research to find somebody, because there are a lot of not great dev agencies out there. And then lean towards going with what you know and figuring out if that aligns towards what they're used to. So thanks for those questions, Joe. Hope my take was helpful. My last question of the day is about the Slack App Store.
Hey Rob, Brian from Denver here. I have been building a Slack app for the Slack store for the last couple of months, and within that time, Slack has changed their submission guidelines from not needing to have your app installed in any workspaces to having your app installed in 10 different Slack workspaces before you are able to submit it to the Slack App Store. Should I continue down this path of building the Slack app, knowing that I'm going to have to convince 10 people to download it to their workspace before I can submit it to the App Store? Or should I continue on with another App Store and build a whole new app there? Thanks, Rob.
If I were in your shoes, Brian, 100% I would keep building. And I would find 10 workspaces that would be willing to install it. This is where I say build your network, not your audience. I would work that network. So if you are a member of MicroConf Connect or of Indie Hackers or any private Slack channels, I would be asking, hey people, I have built a Slack app. Is anyone willing to help me out? I need to get to 10 in order to get to, whatever the status is to, it's not launched, but it's like, well, where they will review it. This happens with Zaps too. And any Zap that we've ever built, or like Tool, because we had to do this with Drip, and there's a bunch of tiny seed companies that have to go through this. And they come into the tiny seed Slack and they say, hey, I built a Zapier integration. I need to get 10 folks on it. Are you willing to install it? And pretty quickly, out of the 204 companies that are in tiny seed, it fills up pretty quick. Sure, I'm willing to try it out, poke around, test it a little bit for bugs, do that thing, and it gets you above the 10. And then, you're able to soft launch it or whatever. So this to me is actually a good thing, because it's a little bit of a barrier to entry for upcoming apps that could potentially compete with you. Not a huge moat though. I mean, to me, this becomes par for the course. If I had an app store myself in my own ecosystem, I would want something like this in place, because otherwise you just get a bunch of crappy code and a bunch of stupid apps that make it that no one wants. And until you are installed on 10 workspaces, and maybe 10 is an arbitrary number, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 20, I think it's a good signal to be installed on these things. And it's not as if you have to wait organically for this to happen. I think that's the big thing, is to work your network and social media. I didn't mention Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever social networks you're on. Those are also good things to be like, hey, who's willing to help me out with testing this out on their Slack workspace? So it feels pretty clear to me. I would not be bailing on this idea just because they put what to me is a very minor hurdle that might take you an extra couple weeks max to get 10 people, to install this, or 10 small companies or whatever. I wouldn't let that scare me away enough to want to build an entirely different app. So hope that one's clear. I know a lot of time there's nuance to these questions. For this one, for me, it's pretty clear what I would do in your shoes. So thanks for the question, Brian. I hope my take was helpful. And there we have it. Another episode in the bag. Hope you enjoyed those listener questions. And as a reminder, if you have a question for the show you'd like to hear me answer or a guest answer, head to startupsfortherestofus.com and click that Ask a Question in the top nav. Audio and video questions, of course, go to the top of the stack, as well as medium and later stage questions. Thanks so much for joining me this week and every week. This is Rob Walling signing off from episode 785.